Professor Nadine Peterson, Executive Dean, Faculty of Education. Professor Emnet Woldegiorgis, our inductee today. Professor Tandi Levin, responded, Associate Professor in the Ali Mazrui Center for Higher Education Studies and the Department of Education Management and Leadership in the Faculty of Education at the University of Johannesburg. Senior leaders of the university, members of Senate and other academics, distinguished guests and students, and all those who are joining us online. Sanbonani, Huyanan, good evening, Tobe. It is indeed a great honor and a special privilege for me to welcome you to the Professorial Inauguration lecture of Professor Emnet Woldegiorgis. As I do so, I wish to express a warm welcome to his loved ones, special guests, and colleagues. This is indeed a proud and joyful, yet a landmark moment for all of you. For Professor Woldegiorgis, for us here at UJ, for higher education in South Africa and beyond. This is particularly noteworthy as we celebrate 20 years of UJ this year. Since the merger in 2005, we have come to exemplify how excellence and access are not mutually exclusive in higher education. In the spirit of innovation and social responsibility, UJ has pushed boundaries and prioritized research, technological advancement, and community engagement. It is against this backdrop that we welcome you into the professorate, a community of scholars dedicated to UJ's ethos of academic excellence while making a tangible impact on society. The inauguration of a professor is a public ceremony in which newly appointed professors are inducted into office by the Vice Chancellor and deliver their inaugural addresses. The ceremony has its roots in the medieval university and serves multiple purposes. First, it is an expression of welcome and an entry for new professors joining the circle of colleagues who are already professors. Secondly, it provides a platform for professors to display their expertise in the discipline and showcase their research. In the colonial traditions subscribed to by many universities still, assuming the role of the professor refers to the gown and the cap. Once we have listened to the inaugural address, the gown denoting professorship will formally be assumed. Today we gather to witness Professor Emnet's entry into the illustrious community of scholars at our university. It celebrates his contribution to the discipline and ultimately his impact on society. Professors provide a university with its identity, character, academic legitimacy, and integrity. The inaugural lecture is a rite of passage following the confirmation of the appointment of a person as a professor. This evening, we will listen to Professor Emnet as the gown goes to town. By this, I mean that the power of the inaugural address is when the expertise is showcased beyond the corridors of the university and reverberates with society. It stands out as a moment of pride for the incumbent, the family, fellow scholars, the university, and ultimately society. In the past, several philosophers and scholars have defined universities using very narrow conceptualizations. For example, the search for truth, for universal knowledge, and even as instruments serving the purpose of the economy or being utilitarian in nature. Through our work and research at UJ, I hope that we can break out of these narrow conceptualizations and reflect on the university as contributing to the public good, working towards societal impact. What is the role of the intellectual then? Edward Said, in one of his articles, defined the role of the intellectual as one who commands a vast knowledge of a specific discipline. 2, one who is rigorous in the analysis of literature. 3, one who views being an intellectual as a vocation. And lastly, one who functions as a kind of public memory to recall what is forgotten or ignored, to make the connections that are otherwise hidden, and to provide alternatives for mistaken policies. It remains then for us, as a university with a Pan-African vision, to derive our mandate as intellectuals and as professors. And importantly, how do we embrace the role of a professor as a disruptor while continuing to be flagship carriers of our disciplines? This evening we will listen to Professor Emnet as one further step in the journey of being a professor. This is a journey which does not conclude once this lecture has been given. Notwithstanding, this inaugural lecture does create an opportunity for self-reflective pause in the journey of the professor. Let me now invite the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Education, Professor Nadine Peterson, to introduce Professor Emnet Woldegiorgis. Professor Nadine, I thank you. Ke a leboga, baya dankie.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alipata. Colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Emnet Woldegiorgis to you this evening. Emnet Woldegiorgis is a professor and he is also director of the Ali Mazrui Center for Higher Education Studies at the University of Johannesburg. His scholarly trajectory has been deeply intertwined with the transformation of African higher education systems as he explores their philosophical, political, and structural dimensions through a global lens. Holding a PhD in politics of development from the University of Beirut in Germany and a joint master's degree in higher education studies from Oslo University, Tampere University, and Aveiro University in Portugal, Professor Emnet exemplifies the international and comparative orientation that characterizes his research and his professional engagements. Over the past 2 decades, he has emerged as one of Africa's leading scholars in higher education studies, with an extensive portfolio of over 40 peer-reviewed publications and several edited volumes. His research interests traverse critical themes such as internationalization, higher education regionalism, epistemic justice, knowledge societies, and the political economy of higher education reforms in Africa. Through these scholarly endeavors, he has consistently sought to advance a decolonial, inclusive, and contextually grounded vision for African universities. As director of AMCES since 2020, Professor Emnet has overseen the center's remarkable growth into one of the continent's leading hubs for higher education, research, and postgraduate training. Under his leadership, AMCES has expanded from a small unit into a vibrant community of over 30 members, and that includes academic staff, postdoctoral research fellows, PhD students, and research associates. The Center has become a continental platform for producing cutting edge scholarship on higher education transformation, social justice, and knowledge production in Africa. Over the years, Professor Emnet's scholarship and leadership have enabled him recognition in various international forums. He currently serves as chair of the World Council for Comparative Education Society's Peace Education Task Force. He also serves as advisory board member of the Finnish Higher Education Partnership Program and as an advisory committee member of the Danish Knowledge and Innovation Program. Professor Emnet's intellectual influence extends beyond publications to both the public and the policy spheres. His opinion pieces in University World News, Daily Maverick, and News 24 have shaped contemporary debates on decolonization, epistemic sovereignty, and the future of African universities. His numerous keynote addresses, some in prominent places such as the London School of Economics, reflect his standing as a global recognized thought leader. His academic vision is anchored in the conviction that African universities must transcend their colonial legacies and neoliberal constraints to become engines of ethical, inclusive, and transformative knowledge societies. Professor Emnet's scholarly and institutional leadership embodies a lifelong commitment to reimagining higher education as a space of critical thought, collaboration, and societal renewal, one where Africa not only participates in global knowledge production, but actively shapes its direction and purpose. So, Professor Emnet Woldegiorgis, please, I invite you to the stage to give us your address.
Yeah, thank you so much for this really overwhelming introduction, and thank you, colleagues, for joining. I've never had a proper graduation when I was doing my undergraduate, master's, and PhD, so this is a very exciting moment for me. Preparing an African scholar to find their place within an academic community historically marked by elitism and exclusion demands far more than an intellectual ambition. It actually requires resilience, sacrifice, and unwavering support of others. To become part of the academic community takes not only personal dedication and hard work, but also the invisible labor of those who believe in you long before the world does. I'm talking about family members, communities, mentors, colleagues, and friends. I come from a humble family in Ethiopia, one that struggled daily to meet even the most basic needs. I am the first of the 6 siblings, and my parents, despite limited means, invested in us the one gift they could truly afford: education. My mother, in particular, devoted her entire life to ensure that her children would complete their studies and live with dignity, independence, and self-respect. She passed away during COVID, but her words of encouragement, her strengths, her boundless faith remain the foundation of everything I have become. My academic journey has taken me across 2 continents, Africa and Europe, and through collaboration with scholars across the world. Each encounter, each mentorship, and each friendship has shaped my intellectual growth and deepened my conviction that knowledge must serve humanity, not hierarchy. Today, I stand here filled with gratitude to the mentors and colleagues across continent who have guided me, my friends, peers, whose solidarity made the journey lighter, and to my family, whose sacrifice remain my greatest inheritance. I'm deeply grateful to my colleagues here at the University of Johannesburg, to my deans for their trust and encouragement, to the entire community at the Ali Mazrui Center for Higher Education Studies. Your creativity, your commitment, and intellectual courage have sustained me in the ongoing work of building a collaborative and inclusive research space, one where African scholarship can breathe freely, challenge convictions, and contribute confidently to the global community of knowledge. I'm also thankful to the SARCHI Chair for Teaching and Learning, Professor Shiri Motela, and her team for their friendship and support. I'm equally grateful to my mentors and research partners in Germany and across Europe whose collaboration and friendship have been central to shaping my intellectual journey and strengthening the bridge between Africa and European scholarship. It is from this deeply personal journey of becoming that I am going to talk about the topic of today, which is building inclusive knowledge society and the role of African higher education in achieving this transformation. Before we speak about the role of African education in institutions, I want to reflect briefly on what we mean by knowledge society. A knowledge society is one in which the creation, sharing, and application of knowledge become central force of development, power, and transformation. In such a society, knowledge is not merely an economic resource. It is a moral and cultural fabric that binds people together, gives meaning to human progress. It is a dynamic process of constructing and sustaining a knowledge structure that actively involves societies in both the production and utilization of meaning and innovation. Here, it is important to distinguish between knowledge society and knowledge economy. The knowledge economy speaks the language of markets and focuses primarily on profits, productivity, and competition. But knowledge society is broader and deeper. It connects knowledge to human values, moral choices, and social inclusion. It is not only about producing technology and wealth, it is about shaping who we are, what we value, and how we live together. We live in a time when knowledge defines identity, power, and shape resistance. So when we speak about knowledge society, we must ask whose knowledge, for whom, and towards what ends. Even though there are various explanations of the characteristics of knowledge society, a genuine knowledge society rests on 5 pillars. And I recently published, not recently actually, I published something about this, and we try to conceptualize what exactly is knowledge society constitutes. And these are some of the pillars: human development through education and lifelong learning, innovation, systems that nurture creativity and discovery, technological infrastructure that ensures access and participation, institutions that uphold good governance, transparency, and equity, and a moral orientation that treats knowledge as a social and civic good. We can boldly argue that within this vision of creating a knowledge society, the university occupies a critical position, a position of creating an inclusive and innovative space. Higher education institutions are not merely sites of professional training or credential production. They are a space where knowledge is created, contested, and reimagined. Universities serve as arenas of imagination and resistance, where dominant paradigms are questioned and alternative epistemologies are explored. They are also heritage sites of ancestral knowledge, repositories of collective memory, and a reflective space where humanity examines its past, interprets its present, and envisions more just and sustainable future. In this sense, the university functions simultaneously as knowledge producer, a cultural mediator, and a moral compass of a society. As the cornerstone of knowledge society, the university's mission therefore extends beyond transmission of information. It embodies the pursuit of intellectual freedom, social responsibility, and the collective aspiration to transform knowledge into public good and serve humanity as a whole. So the central question, therefore, is how can we build a higher education system that does not merely reproduce existing hierarchies of knowledge, power, and privilege, but rather function as an engine of justice, creativity, and transformation. The task before African higher education is not simply to generate knowledge, but to interrogate the condition, purposes, and consequences of its production. The question then is not whether African universities produce knowledge, but what kind of knowledge they produce, for whose benefits, and towards which vision of the society. Africa is currently the second fastest growing economic region in the world after Asia. It is also home to the youngest population globally, with nearly 70% of Africans under the age of 30. In 2024, 11 of the world's 20 fastest growing economies were located on the continent, underscoring Africa's increasing prominence in the global economic landscape. Despite these promising indicators, the continent's higher education and research capacity remain significantly underdeveloped. Africa has approximately 2,400 recognized higher education institutions. Yet, tertiary enrollment stands at only 11% compared to the global average of 38%. This is global average. Moreover, more than 25% of young people aged between 15 and 24 are neither in education, employment, nor training. So Africa's expanding economy is increasingly demanding skilled labor. Yet, the rising trend of graduate unemployment reveals a profound mismatch between what higher education institutions produce and what the emerging economy requires. This figure reveals a stark disparity between Africa's demographic and economic potential and the limited expansion of its higher education systems, as an imbalance that poses a critical challenge to the continent's long-term development endeavors. Moreover, across the continent, growing trends of violent crime, conflict, gender-based violence, social intolerance reveals deep fractures in our societies. signs that higher education has not yet succeeded in nurturing the ethical, empathic, and social consciousness that our time needs. So the task before us, therefore, is not only to expand access to education, but to make it relevant to our reality, our aspirations, and our moral imaginations. As numerous studies shows, African higher education faces a web of interrelated challenges, epistemic and moral as much as structural and material, that continue to hinder the continent's progress towards building a genuine knowledge society. Chronic underfunding, inadequate infrastructure, the rapid massification of enrollment without proportional investments have weakened the sector's ability to serve as a site of innovation and critical inquiry. At the epistemic level, the hegemony of Eurocentric paradigms continue to constrain the decolonial imagination, marginalizing indigenous knowledge systems and reinforcing dependency on external validations. The digital divide deepens this inequality, excluding many from global knowledge networks, while poverty, gender disparity, and social exclusion further reproduce hierarchies of access and participation. Moreover, governance challenges, including limiting institutional autonomy, bureaucratic inertia, institutional inefficiencies, and incoherent policy frameworks, erode accountability and choke the transformative potential of many African universities. The question again is, how can we build a relevant higher education system in Africa that plays a decisive role in shaping an inclusive knowledge society against the backdrop of these enduring challenges? I offer 7 reflections, not as prescriptions, but as a guiding thoughts towards cultivating such society, and as invitation to all of us to think collectively about the future of African higher education. I will explain each of them. The first one is epistemic inclusion, which is a foundation for building a knowledge society. And I believe we must reimagine the university beyond its narrow conception of as a site of training. Universities in Africa in particular are not merely a space of professional preparation, they are also arenas of aspiration, struggle, identity formation, and collective becoming. Within this vision, the university cannot continue to mirror a monolithic and Eurocentric culture. Epistemic inclusion must move beyond policy rhetoric to become a moral and intellectual commitment to rehumanize academic spaces that have long privileged the few while silencing the many. When there is no genuine synergy between epistemological foundation of our universities and the socio-cultural context they serve, the aspiration to build an inclusive knowledge society remains fundamentally incomplete. For knowledge divorced from its context cannot serve as an instrument of emancipation or transformation. So, to build an inclusive knowledge society, higher education must become a site of epistemic renewal, one that recognizes, values, and integrates the continent's own intellectual traditions, heritage, and visions. Building inclusive knowledge society thus requires not only the democratization of access, but the decolonization of epistemology, creating a space where indigenous philosophies, oral traditions, and communal epistemologies stand alongside global sciences, not beneath it. The second one, which is also a very important pillar for creating a knowledge society, is reimagining the university as a public good. African universities today find themselves pulled between their public mission and the growing pressure of market rationality. They are increasingly governed by hybrid logic, academic freedom, market accountability, and state control. While these hybrid arrangements have enhanced efficiency and global competitiveness, they have also obscured the moral center of the university, the vocation that once defined its intellectual spirit and the social dimension of higher education. A university defined only by market indicators cannot nurture a locally grounded knowledge society. True success lies in its transformative impact and the social relevance of its research. To build an inclusive knowledge society, therefore, the university must be reasserted as a public good, not merely in economic or utilitarian terms, but as a moral, cultural, and civic institution that sustains democracy, cultivates citizenship, and broadens the horizon of human possibility. African universities must therefore move beyond elitism and exclusion to become open and inclusive space that embody the principles of equity, justice, and care. The third idea is embracing multidisciplinary or transdisciplinarity in teaching, learning, and research. For too long, African universities have been organized around rigid disciplinary boundaries, fragmentation of knowledge that reflects the colonial legacy of producing compliant administrators rather than critical and imaginative thinkers. While traditional disciplines offer theoretical depth, they are often inadequate for addressing the complex and interconnected socio-economic and political challenges that defines contemporary Africa. Issues such as climate change, food insecurity, governance, migration, and digital transformation demands not narrow specialization, but integrative and systemic thinking. Transdisciplinarity in particular is vital as it transcends disciplinary boundaries and fosters the co-creation of knowledge with society rather than merely about society. This paradigm recognizes communities, practitioners, and citizens as active agents of knowledge production, transforming research and teaching into dialogue between theory and practice, campus and community, and academy and the world. So students must learn not only within disciplines, but through and beyond them, engaging with real-world problems that demand both analytical rigor and a moral imagination. Embracing multidisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity thus signifies reclaiming the unity of knowledge, healing the epistemic fracture that have long divided science and humanity, and reaffirming the African University as a custodian of an inclusive, community-centered knowledge society. The fourth one is diversifying the higher education landscape. Building an inclusive knowledge society requires moving beyond traditional university models. African higher education remain overly academic and theory-driven, privileging the cognitive over the practical and the credential over the creative. To build a knowledge society that reflects Africa's lived realities and developmental aspirations, higher education must be plural and interconnected. TVT institutions, teacher colleges, professional schools, community learning centers, micro-credentials should be recognized and integrated as pillars of the continent's evolving knowledge ecosystem. Achieving this vision requires flexible frameworks that actually enable mobility across institutional types, allowing learners to move seamlessly between vocational and academic pathways. In the context of rapidly growing or evolving economies in Africa at the moment, the need for practical, skill-oriented training increasingly surpasses the demand for narrowly disciplinary or theory-based education. And this is something where African higher education need to also consider restructuring their programs. And the fifth is strengthening the research policy nexus from knowledge production to social impact. The enduring disconnect between academia and policymaking has created a landscape of intellectual fragmentation, where knowledge is produced but seldom mobilized for social benefit. To build effective and inclusive knowledge societies, universities must evolve into policy laboratories, a space where research is translated into frameworks that inform governance, stimulate innovation, and empower communities. This transformation demands effective mechanisms for research uptake and also a strong linkage among universities, government, and the industry. When research meaningfully informs policy and animates practice, the university ceases to be distant observer of development policies. Rather, it is co-architect, an active participant in the ongoing reimagining of a society. The other important point, probably relevant for knowledge society, is investing in digital infrastructure and knowledge sovereignty. No contemporary knowledge society can thrive without digital inclusion, of course. Digitalization must be understood, however, not merely as a technological upgrade, but a project of knowledge sovereignty, a transformative effort enabling African institutions to produce, organize, and disseminate their own intellectual resources. The development of open access repositories, digital libraries, and Africa-led data infrastructure is therefore crucial for democratizing access to knowledge, reducing dependency on external platforms, and safeguarding the continent's intellectual assets. Strengthening the digital infrastructure of African higher education is essential to ensure that the continent's intellectual capital remain accessible, autonomous, and globally visible. Finally, building Pan-African and global solidarity in knowledge production is also a very important direction when we think of building a knowledge society. The future of African knowledge society depends on transcending national, linguistic, and institutional boundaries to foster continental and global intellectual solidarities. As we all know, historically, Africa's engagement with global academia has been shaped by asymmetrical dependencies where collaboration have too often extracted rather than exchanged knowledge. To address this imbalance, partnership must be reimagined as horizontal co-creation, anchored in reciprocity, equity, and mutual learning. In this regard, of course, we have some examples like continental frameworks such as the African Research University Alliance, Codicea, and other institutions could offer a vital platform for cultivating collaborative research ecosystem that amplify African perspectives in addressing global challenges. Moreover, through strong South-South collaboration, African higher education can emerge as a strong knowledge ecosystem and move from periphery to the center of global knowledge production, emerging as a source of critical scholarship, humanistic values, and transformative hope for the world. In conclusion, I do argue that the task of building inclusive knowledge societies in Africa is not merely an institutional or technical. It is an ethical and intellectual project that redefines the very purpose of university. It called for a renewal of higher education's moral vision, where knowledge functions not as a privilege of power, but as a shared resource for collective advancement. Transforming African higher education requires a dual commitment, to decolonize the structure of knowledge and to democratize the condition of learning. It is also important to revisit how we define institutional excellence, because excellence must be redefined not only by ranking or citations, but also by relevance, ethical responsibility, and social contributions. Africa stands at the pivotal moment. With its youth population and expanding economies, the continent holds an immense potential to reimagine the meaning and purpose of knowledge in the 21st century. Realizing this vision demands universities that are epistemically grounded, socially engaged, technologically empowered, and globally connected, that serve as catalysts of justice, creativity, and inclusion. So let us therefore envision universities not only as a space of instruction, but also a site of imagination, a renewal grounded in African experience, yet open to the world. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm very honored to be standing here in this gown as your colleague and friend, Prof. Woldegiorgis. I want to say Nkwan Desale. Did I say it right? Makorokoto, congratulations, Ukuhala Lisela. That's all various congratulatory messages, but the first one was Amharic, so luckily we have Google Translate. Prof. Emnet, you have made a sustained contribution to shaping the field of higher education studies. Over the course of your academic and intellectual career, you have shown the importance of deep critique and intellectual thought, theorizing the links between social transformation and higher education, shaping theory and praxis with the goal of developing our thinking here in South Africa, on the continent, and beyond the continent to the rest of the world. You have used your academic voice to push the boundaries of what we think about higher education and what we aspire for it to become. And I think you showed us that today. It was really exciting, wonderful. As a leading thinker on higher education in Africa, Prof. Emnet provides a critical lens from the global south, but is also a recognized global thinker. You are shaping the field internationally while also developing new perspectives from a Pan-African viewpoint. You have demonstrated a deep commitment to the goals of equitable internationalization, epistemic justice, and the meaningful decolonization of knowledge and knowledge processes. In preparing for today, I had conversations with our colleagues in the Ali Mazrui Center, which has grown under your leadership, building on the strong foundations laid by Professor Michael Cross. And I would like to acknowledge that my input is inclusive of and shaped by our colleagues as well. In a seminal piece on the changing role of higher education in Africa, a historical reflection, you took us beyond the structural challenges of governance and funding to question the very origins and purposes of African universities, and you've done so again today. You have pointed out that universities on the continent did not emerge solely from African intellectual traditions, but were instead superimposed as colonial institutions designed to manage rather than cultivate African knowledge. And this framing demonstrates that even the nation-building aspirations of the independence and the post-apartheid eras unfolded within an inherited institutional architecture whose epistemic core remained external to African epistemologies and ontologies. By showing us how structural adjustment deepened this dependency and how the knowledge economy continues to reinscribe it in a commodified and marketized form, you've compelled us to reconsider the fundamental question about what and who African universities are for. So in continuing to think beyond the norms that trap us in intellectual dependencies, you push us to question and think more deeply. Prof. Woldegiorgis skillfully straddles the local, African, and the global. He has a way of weaving the ideas of the South with those of the North that is both helpful and hopeful. This, in fact, is reminiscent, I think, of the great Kenyan academic Ali Mazrui, after whom our center is named. Under his leadership, we are engaging, under Emnet's leadership, we are engaging with the global, but on our own terms. Prof. Emnet is a leading proponent of continuing the work of Ali Mazrui and other great thinkers who have shown that Africa can assert its own intellectual and cultural independence by understanding its complex histories and finding ways to achieve epistemic change. You have proved pragmatic in centering Africa while also understanding that modern realities influence where we are going. This is very much, I think, linked and intertwined with Ali Mazrui's intellectual transdisciplinarity, and I believe this is a tradition that you are also, and hopefully we are also carrying on. A quote from Paul Zeleza, who I found this something that he wrote last year, and it's him thinking with Ali Mazrui, and he says, "I believe in Mazrui's injunction that Africa and Africans must be players, not perpetual pawns in world affairs. I have also long been intrigued by the closing statement in the Triple Heritage, one of Ali Mazrui's great works. We are a people of the day before yesterday and the people of the day after tomorrow," which I read, as in Paul Zeleza, not me, which I read as a tribute to Africa's endurance as the oldest continent where human history began, and as the youngest continent with a youth bulge that will give it 40% of the world's population by the end of the 21st century, and therefore determine what happens to the world. In short, the 21st century will be an African century. That's Paul Zeleza, not me. Prof. Emnet, you are a compassionate, kind, respectful, supportive, yet firm director, and I'm incorporating our general viewpoint here, allowing AMCAS to position our work nationally and internationally through your open and inclusive leadership style. This gives us all space to grow and learn. And much like Professor Michael Cross, who founded our center, Emnet embodies the same spirit of intellectual humility and openness that Michael was so well known for. And we're so grateful to you, Prof, for taking forward Michael's vision for the center as well. As Prof Emnet reminds us, education and higher education in particular are more than just a developmental imperative. They are a project with a human and ethical centered purpose. And I think with your focus on human flourishing, I can turn you into a capability scholar as well. He takes us back to the aspirational ideas about higher education that resonate strongly with post-apartheid and post-colonial policy imaginaries. At the same time, he takes us forward to imagine spaces of epistemic agency and knowledge for the public good. And then I think that we ignore his thinking at our peril. Professor Woldegiorgis, Emnet, Prof. Emnet, we are proud and happy to be working with and learning from you as we expand and grow the field of African higher education studies in partnership with others. Congratulations.
it is possible to have a nice picture with you and me in it. Huh? Honored guests, we have come to the end of our formalities today. What is left is for me just to thank everyone, maybe starting with Bernice. Where is she? Has she disappeared? Once again for organizing this wonderful event, our media team here, for capturing everything today, for Prof. Emnet to watch and enjoy into prosperity. Thanks very much, Prof. Nadine Peterson, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Education. This is the second professorial inauguration we did together. So contrary to popular belief, you and I are good colleagues. Prof. Tandy Levin, thanks very much for your kind but great words. And Prof. Emnet, you are the person of the moment. I understood most of what you said, which means that you said it very well. Right? You said it very well, and I really enjoyed it. And I hope today is not the end, but it will mark a really turning point in your life and in your career as an academic here at the University of Johannesburg. It was a great, great pleasure to be part of this inauguration today. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of my speech, which still has got a few minutes to go, you are invited to go to the lounge whence you came from and enjoy some refreshments for the rest of the evening and take liberty to correct him. Right? But thank you very much. Let's give him another round of applause.